Hello, hello, everybody, and welcome back to the War of Ideas. Thank you for tuning in or for watching after the fact. Today, we only have one topic because I do not have a lot of time, but I think this topic is going to be more than adequate to interest all of you, and that is the third GOP debate. It happened last Wednesday. It was Royal Rumble. There was massive implications, lots of funny, clippable moments. So I want to get into it. But first, to set the scene a little bit, at this point, multiple people have already dropped out of the race. Mike Pence dropped out of the race before this debate, and as did the illustrious Doug Burgum. We know that he dropped out, but Doug Burgum ultimately will return and will claim the throne of America. As we know, he is an unstoppable political force. Asa Hutchinson also dropped out, but honestly, I almost forgot to mention him. Nobody cares about Asa Hutchinson. So on stage, there was Nikki Haley, for those who don't know, former UN ambassador, Vivek Ramaswamy, entrepreneur, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, Tim Scott is a senator, and Chris Christie, who is the governor of New Jersey, I believe, for a long, long time, who doesn't like Donald Trump. So that is the scene we have set. Today, we are going to be going through the highlights. So we're going to start playing those, and I will give you the creme de la creme, the best breakdown possible of all of these moments and their broader implications. So should be a good time. Let's check it out.
You on this one. Speak to Republican voters who are supporting Donald Trump. Why should you and not him be the Republican nominee to face Joe Biden a year from now?
Now, if you look where we are now, it's a lot different than where we were in 2016. And Donald Trump's a lot different guy than he was in 2016. He owes it to you to be on this stage and explain why he should get another chance. He said Republicans were going to get tired of winning. Well, we saw last night, I'm sick of Republicans losing.
So this is the angle that DeSantis has been going for this entire time. So for those who don't know, DeSantis has been basically has been essentially marketing himself as Trump without the baggage, or that Trump was good at the time, but now it's my turn. Unfortunately for him, nobody really seems to be buying that. And the reason for that is because, one, Trump seems exactly like the same guy he was in 2016. It does not look like he's changed. The only things that have changed is our experience with him and what we know about him. But in terms of in terms of in terms of him being still who he is and still wanting the things he wants, that hasn't changed at all, actually. So it's kind of difficult to make this argument. The other issue, the other main issue is the fact that this kind of leaves him politically homeless, right? You'd think that this would unite the moderates and everybody who would vote for Trump but doesn't love Trump. But it turns out it's kind of done the opposite, actually. I'm just going off of the polling data. Like, he's not surging past Trump right now. And even if he had all of the support that everybody else has been getting, so let's say that the field consolidates and it's just him and Trump, even if he got all that support, he's still only competitive with Trump. And that's not going to happen because a lot of the people who like Vivek, who would vote for Vivek, would vote for Trump before DeSantis. So that's not going to happen. And it's left him politically homeless because the theory that he would unite the reluctant Trumpers and the moderate Republicans is not correct. What actually winds up happening is that the moderates get scared of him because he markets himself as Trump 2.0, as Trump, but better and cleaner and that sort of thing. And that doesn't attract the moderates. That actually scares them away. And for the reluctant Trumpers, some of the reluctant Trumpers like DeSantis, but that's not enough because there's most people who would vote for Trump are not reluctant. Most people who vote for Trump actually really like Donald Trump and really think that he is a singularly unique politician, which of course that he is. So all DeSantis has is some people who are reluctant about Trump. But he's only getting a portion of those, and he's scaring away all the moderates that would have been the main part of his base, because the people who are in the bag for Trump are 100% in the bag for Trump. They can't be convinced to another guy. It's not always about policy. It is about policy to some extent, but really it's about trust in the man and the man's ability to do what he says he's going to do and be the guy. So yeah, this political strategy of him trying to just be like the new and improved Trump just doesn't work because nobody's better at being Trump than Trump is. So you're scaring away moderates and you're not really appealing to the people who actually like the orange man. So yeah, this unfortunately, this political strategy has not been working out for dear old Ron the way he thought it was going to. So this is a good point. DeSantis is totally right about this. If you watched any of the local elections that were happening this November, this is very like a double off year, I believe. It was not good. Republicans lost across the board. They lost in Iowa, or I believe it was Iowa. Let me double check. See, I'm getting caught my pants down here because I don't remember. It was not Iowa. It was Ohio. Yeah. So in Ohio, they enshrined a constitutional amendment to basically enshrine abortion all the way up to the day of birth as something that is allowed. Um, and very lots of local elections in New York and in Ohio and Wisconsin, even lots of local elections started to lose. And the fact that DeSantis is talking about this is very good, because it's true. Republicans, there's a good saying that you should be as innocent as a dove and as wise as a serpent, and the Republicans have been quite the opposite. We have not been smart. They have not been tactical in any way. They have not been particularly effective. There was no counter resolution in Ohio. There was no counter proposal that we will enshrine the right to life or we will protect it. The on the ground tactics just weren't there. Lots of people are claiming that it's because abortion is fundamentally a losing issue. I don't think that you can say that yet because we haven't seen a tactically sound and like intelligent pro-life argument in a local election yet, because in issue one it was not argued particularly well in my estimation from my people who I know on the ground there. Have been telling me that it was pretty disorganized. So he's dead on about needing to make sure that Republicans have been losing and have been technically losing for the last 60 years, but most importantly, the other day. But unfortunately, it doesn't really help him that much because other candidates are saying that too. I mean, every candidate is talking about Republicans winning more to some extent, but Vivek and Trump are saying it as just as explicitly as DeSantis is. They're also saying we're about winning. We're about, beating them Dems. Trump is, I am your retribution. I am your vengeance, says Donald Trump. So not only are all Republicans saying, I will win more often for you, but two of the Republicans are saying it just as explicitly. So it doesn't really set him apart the way he wants to. It's right. It's true. But, being correct is not actually enough to win most of the time. You have to, be correct and unique and also likable. And that's a hard path to walk.
Wants to talk about President Trump. Well, I can talk about President Trump. I can tell you that I think he was the right president at the right time. I don't think he's the right president now.
Yeah, again, she's trying to do the DeSantis thing, where she says he was the right guy, but he's not the right guy anymore. And same thing with DeSantis. You're not actually telling me why. They're not going after his record in particularly harsh fashion. If you want to tell me he was good at the time, okay, most Republicans will buy that. Saying that he's not the right guy now, like you got to show your work there, Miss Haley. We're not going to believe you just because you say that. There's good arguments. There's good arguments for the idea that Trump is no longer the guy. There's great arguments for that. But nobody's making them particularly effectively. You can make an effective argument. That doesn't necessarily mean the argument is right, by the way. Effective arguments does not mean they are correct arguments, but they're not really doing that. We'll see some of the other highlights they do, but I watched the debate and I only heard like a couple of mentions and it wasn't for a very long time. It was pretty low. And that's the issue because Trump is running away with it. Like this is the undercard. This is, the debate for cabinet positions more than anything. And that's kind of showing because if they were debating for president, they'd be laying into Trump way harder. So yeah, cool. But first of all, prove it to me. And second of all, go after him harder.
We've become a party of losers at the end of the day. It was a cancer in the Republican establishment. Let's speak the truth. I mean, since Ronna McDaniel took over as chairwoman of the RNC in 2017, we have lost 2018, 2020, 2022, no red wave that never came. We got trounced last night in 2023. And I think that we have to have accountability in our party.
That's super true. Like, yes, correct. Good job, Vivek. Super true. But again, this is a problem for Vivek and DeSantis because they're both talking about how we keep losing. So it's kind of difficult to set them apart. What Vivek should have done there, if he was actually running for president, is talk about why there was no red wave in 2022. One of the reasons, not the only reason, is that Trump was, talking about how voting wouldn't like be effective or how it wouldn't work, and stuff like that, because he doesn't believe that the election was proper last time, and he was basically being a discouraging force on voter turnout in 2022 in a way that was a pretty big issue. So if Vivek was actually running for president, he would have leaned into that. He said, we need to be a party of winning, we need to be a party of accountability, and that starts with Trump, who did X, Y, and Z to make sure that we kept losing. Like, that's an argument. Not necessarily an argument I believe, but if Vivek was actually running for president and was actually trying to take down Donald Trump, that's what he would say. But he's not saying that because Vivek isn't actually running for president. Vivek is running for something else. He's running to get his ideas put in there, and potentially, to land somewhere better in the future, which is not something that's uncommon or even necessarily condemnable. Although I would say it's not ideal. But again, this is just evidence that he's not actually running for president. He is and always has been a self-sacrifice candidate. So more evidence of that there. Amazing how you can be correct. Like, all the four of these people were like correct about things in their different variations, but still all not optimal. Very interesting.
As President of the United States, what would you be urging Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to do at this moment? Governor DeSantis.
Just brief aside, the first hour of this debate was all about foreign policy. It was kind of crazy how much time was committed to foreign policy. Foreign policy is really important right now, but half of the debate was just about this, and it got repetitive.
I would be telling Bibi, finish the job once and for all with these butchers Hamas.
Good job on DeSantis for saying butchers Hamas. When you say finish them all, people are going to want to say, oh, look, he's calling for genocide against all Palestinians, including the innocent ones. Good optics from DeSantis specifying Hamas. Well, good optics and also, good moral position, because Palestinian civilians and Hamas are not the same thing. So good in general, but also good optics to make sure that he specifies that.
The last thing we need to do is to tell Israel what to do. The only thing we should be doing is supporting them and eliminating Hamas. It is not that Israel needs America. America needs Israel.
That is the most insane line of the night for like 5 different reasons. Well, 5 is an exaggeration, but that is probably the most insane answer of the night. Unbelievable. And this is coming from a guy who thinks Hamas is evil and thinks Israel is well within its rights to take them out. And even me, who is like relatively friendly to Israel, says that this is a insane proposition because America is bankrolling Israel currently and is helping them fund this war. And you can think about that what you want, but remember back to what Nikki Haley said, that America doesn't need to be telling Israel what to do. Are you kidding me? America is basically bankrolling the war. We should have a massive role in what Israel is to do. Now, again, what we should be telling them is, yes, take out Hamas. But that she's basically saying we should sign a blank check to them and then not tell them how to spend it or tell them how we want it spent. Completely blank check. For like in the checkbox where it says like for something, we should leave that blank too. That's unbelievable. That's an insane position. That's absolutely insane. Now, if what she meant was that we shouldn't be telling them what to do in terms of like we shouldn't be telling them to not go after Hamas, sure. But in that case, either she's just like stupid in terms of her actual content or has made an unbelievable optical blunder for not being specific. Because that's insane. She has to know she already has this warmonger rep. She has to know that. So, even if that's not what she meant, it's unbelievably incompetent to not specify that way. Also, she said Israel doesn't need America. America doesn't need Israel. I don't know what that means. I don't know why anybody would believe that that's true. She would need to specify, because it seems pretty clear that Israel, at least if doesn't need, definitely likes America because we fund a lot of the stuff that they do. Like, ultimately, they have nukes and can, in the worst possible scenario, defend themselves just fine. But I've never heard a convincing argument for why America like super, super duper needs Israel. She said something like it's nice to have a strategic partner in the Middle East, which I am sympathetic to, but you have to specify that claim a hell of a lot more than you do to justify the payment going in. Like, you have to be specific. You have to convince me why you're right. And I suppose this isn't really Nikki Haley's fault. This is really just the fault of like our current debate formats, where we just like try to generate clippable vague lines instead of having like actual like in-depth policy discussions. Partially the fault of the debates, and the format of the debates is partially just the fault of like what the American electorate is like, which is not really anybody's fault but human nature's, unfortunately. But all that said, still, Israel doesn't need America. America needs Israel is a completely insane statement, because even if it's like nice for America to have Israel around, like, we don't need it. That's not a thing that like America needs. And it's very difficult to make the argument that Israel doesn't heavily rely on America. So that answer, as I said, completely insane. Absolutely demented. Even if you interpret it in like the best light, it's just a massive like optical blunder in terms of phrasing. So yeah, that was a very bad answer for Nikki Haley, and Vivek, I think, in this next clip is going to make her pay for it.
Has the right and the responsibility to defend itself. I would tell him to smoke those terrorists on his southern border, and then I'll tell him, as President of the United States, I'll be smoking the terrorists on our southern border. And what is Biden doing?
Okay, decent answer. They cut off the first part of his answer. And the first part of his answer is that the point of Israel is that Israel will be independent, won't need to rely on other nations, and can defend itself, because that was the original Zionist justification for Israel, is that like throughout human history, Jews have been prosecuted, and therefore we need our own state that is independent, that can defend us on our own terms. That was the first part of his answer. And that was actually an important part, because that makes Vivek unique, because Vivek was the only one talking about not actually saying that America should be helping Israel. What he was saying is that Israel's whole point is that they should be able to do this themselves. But of course, on a moral level, I endorse their right to do just that. So he's really unique in answering that way. Every other person on that stage does talk about like directly supporting Israel, and Vivek just says moral support, sure. And then he just doesn't touch the actual like physical support question. Now, how you feel about that answer, is up to you, but it is unique. And the fact that they would cut it is very strange decision by the creator of this highlight reel, which is MSNBC. So very strange decision there. I don't know why they made that decision. I actually don't even have a guess this time. But his point about, and then he transitions to saying that we should smoke the terrorists on our southern borders. It's decent. It's kind of it's a basic political maneuver to say bring it back to domestic, and fix this issue that I'm strong on. So good answer from Vivek. Risky answer, right? Because he's the only one who answered this way, who didn't directly say he'd support Israel. And Vivek can do that because, again, he's not actually running for president. So that's interesting. Definitely an interesting answer there, for sure. By the way, if you guys don't remember, in the second debate, literally all of them like made that transition, but they made it like longer. They're like, we don't need to worry about Ukraine's border. We need to worry about our border. And they like talked about that incessantly. And like, even as a guy who's like sympathetic to that like political point of view, even to me, it got really annoying when every single candidate would say it and like would like go at it such lengths. But nobody would say that about Israel's border, except for Vivek, and he does it in very short and shrunken fashion. And this is not to say that the issues of Ukraine and Israel are equivalent in terms of America's national interest. It is just to say it's an interesting difference that should be drawn between those two debates, and whatever implications you want to draw from that, you can. I wouldn't necessarily draw any other than that Vivek is more isolationist than the rest of them.
Not only is he not helping the Jewish students who are being persecuted, he is launching an initiative to combat so-called Islamophobia. No, it's the anti-Semitism that's spiraling out of control.
Ukraine.
Yeah, so that is kind of a weird one from DeSantis. I mean, good going after Biden, but also it's a primary. So again, you should really be going after Trump, because everybody on that stage thinks Biden is insane and is doing insane things. I've heard this argument a lot, that like the focus on Islamophobia is weird. And like, that's true, because you're basically just like the issue that is generally more prevalent in the United States, like just by FBI statistics, is anti-Semitic stuff. And I imagine that is definitely true right about now. So it's kind of like sleight of hand to talk about that. It's basically a distraction issue. But also, it does really feel like whataboutism when DeSantis does that. He's like, Islamophobia isn't the issue. This is the issue. Um, it's just not very. It's not very likable, basically. Like, it doesn't make you likable. It feels like both of those things can be problems. If he said something like, look, Islamophobia is bad, but that's not the real issue here. The real issue is this. This is what's much more common, and the Biden administration is trying to distract from it because their weakness has allowed for this conflict. If you're just more specific, then you're going to be a lot more likable. But when you say something like, this isn't the problem, this is the problem, when both of the things are obviously bad, it's just not the ideal phrasing. So, minor slip up by DeSantis there.
Is not a paragon of democracy. This is a country that has banned 11 opposition parties. It has consolidated all media into one state TV media arm. That's not democratic. It has threatened not to hold elections this year unless the U.S. forks over more money. That is not democratic. It has celebrated a Nazi in its ranks, the comedian in cargo pants, a man called Zelensky, doing it in their own ranks. That is not democratic.
I am telling.
Yeah, so Vivek really doesn't like the aid to Ukraine, obviously. Comedian in cargo pants is crazy, and not a reference that most people will understand. For those who don't know, Zelensky was a actor in a Ukrainian sitcom, I believe. And just talking about how Ukraine is infamously corrupt, that is a true thing. But that's more of an argument to watch the money more closely than to not donate it at all. And it's also a weird audience to talk to. Like, when the Democrats talk about protecting our democracy, that would make sense. But Republicans don't usually do the rah-rah democracy thing. And it's not because, like, they don't like representative government. It's just not usually, like, their MO. So it's kind of a weird answer. But, fiery and memorable and funny is basically Vivek. So that's effective. Also, it kind of ties in, for those who don't remember, it's interesting how, like, everybody's okay with admitting that Ukraine is super corrupt now, even though Trump got impeached for basically ensuring that corruption continued to be investigated in Ukraine, because that impeachment was an absolute sham. Maybe we'll talk about it sometime at more depth.
Putin and President Xi are salivating at the thought that someone like that could become president. They would love to.
The fact of the matter is, she doesn't answer.
So this is what I will tell you.
We're driving Russia into China's hands because.
So Nikki and Vivek have actually disagreed about this in all three of the debates, is about what's the best foreign policy to deal with Russia and China. And obviously, Nikki Haley thinks that Vivek's more isolationist approach, where you kind of leave them alone, is better, is worse. She thinks that that's insane and that it allows them to rise to power unchallenged. That's one foreign policy theory. And then Vivek's foreign policy theory is that actually, when we get into these conflicts, especially in Ukraine, especially with Russia, and Russia's also kind of like halfway funding the Israel stuff too, on the not Israel side. And Vivek thinks that if you continue to fight Russia this way and continue to make their lives difficult and make their economics lives difficult, there are going to be more desirous of allies, and the ready and waiting ally there is China. So that's what they're disagreeing about. But the way they disagree about it, no average voter at home is going to understand really what the dueling theories are. She just says they can't wait for him to be president, and he's like, if she's president, her policies will drive them into China's arms. And everybody at home is like, why? Why are these things true? I don't understand. Actually, no, that's probably me being a little bit too optimistic. Most people are like, yeah, she's right, or yeah, he's right. And in their head, they don't actually know why, but they're just saying it because they feel that way. That's probably a more accurate depiction of what the average American electorate is like currently. But in my mind, I'm like, why should I believe either of these? I mean, both of those theories seem somewhat credible, like a little bit. It depends on what you think of Russia's ambitions, fundamentally. It depends on if you think Russia is really as ambitious as more hawkish people say Russia is. Even if that is true, that doesn't mean Vivek is wrong. It just means that, it's the lesser of the two evils. But yeah, very interesting debate that doesn't get had in this debate. Instead, we just get, vague sound bites that people say but don't prove. Unfortunately, we need to get away from this type of debate. I know I said it's kind of the American electorate's fault because this is what they like, but you know what? I don't care what the American electorate likes. I care what's good and true and also beautiful, but that's not relevant here. Um, instead, like long form interviews would be ideal. And I know it's a very like basic normie like self improvement hacks take, but I do think that long form interviews or even long form one on one moderated conversations between presidential candidates would be the ideal way to do this. One on one, two on two, like whatever. Just like if it was more long form and moderated, it would be better. Um, because they would actually have to defend their actual policies, and they would have more of an incentive to be civil, and they have more an incentive to get to the truth instead of just the sound bites, and everything would be better. And hopefully, that would have an influence on the electorate because culture is upstream of politics, yes, but it's also cyclical. Politics is also upstream of culture, which is something Vivek actually says and makes a good note of it. I don't know if they'll play it in this highlight reel. But yeah, this format of debate is like where it's just very short form and it's very clippy and it's very kind of empty and like nobody gets to dive into anything in real depth. Um, no bueno. Don't like it. And this exchange shows exactly why. Like that's an interesting foreign policy debate here. No one's gonna understand it. Tell you that.
You had your time to talk.
TikTok is not only spyware, it is polluting the minds of American young people all throughout this country, and they're doing it intentionally.
In the last debate,
That's base Chris Christie, by the way. Absolutely correct. TikTok is garbage. Get rid of it.
she made fun of me for actually joining TikTok while her own daughter was actually using the app for a long time. So you might want to take care of your family first.
Leave my daughter out of your voice.
Adult daughter. The next generation of Americans are using it.
As much as I'm
Yeah, that's a total misstep. That's a total misstep. And also, Vivek knew it was a misstep. So, yeah. So again, Vivek is fiery, and that means that he has high highs, and it means he has low lows, and that was insane. That was an insane point to make. So like in terms of substance, like he's not wrong that like she said. So Vivek is more libertarian. He doesn't want to get rid of TikTok, and he's pointing out that Nikki Haley's daughter uses TikTok. So does she really believe what she says when she says she wants to get rid of it? Immediately he realized he fucked up. Because immediately he specifies, if you hear him, he says her adult daughter. He specifies adult because he realizes that it sounds really bad to refer to a politician's kid. Now, her daughter is like 25, I think. So it doesn't really help. Even if he wasn't, like, you kind of have to leave kids out of it unless, you're like a super criminal like Hunter Biden or something. But yeah, major misstep. In terms of, and also the point isn't particularly substantive either. Like it's really just more a knock on Haley and her consistency more than like an actual substance argument based on the issue. So that was probably Vivek's worst answer of the night. It gets attention, it gets clips, it's in the highlight reel. But in terms of like actually like making a substantive point, and in terms of just making him likable, it's a big old X-nay on both of those. That did not happen. And Nikki Haley responded the way she should with indignation, pointing out why this makes Vivek very unlikable. So good job to her countering that. Again, not really substantive. Like, again, she could have just responded like, that's different because, my daughter is 25 and not a child, which would have been the more interesting way to go, saying like, yeah, I think it should be allowed for adults, but I just think there should be an age restriction on TikTok in the US. That could have been something. But no, instead she just pointed out that how Vivek like was kind of being a dick. And that's nice, but not ideal. So again, we have the theme of lack of substance. Gonna be a broken record on this. Don't even care. You guys got to deal with it.
I'm pro-life.
All 0 viewers have to deal with it. It's incredible.
I don't judge anyone for being pro-choice, and I don't want them to judge me for being pro-life.
Okay, I lied. This answer is even more insane. This answer is even more insane than the last answer she gives. If you are pro-life, you are pro-life because you believe in that the unborn child has a right to life. That's why people are pro-life. It is because they believe the unborn child has a right to life. I'm not aware of any pro-life person anywhere who doesn't believe that. And if you believe the child has a right to life, it means you believe it's something like, approximating a baby, something similar. To say that you would not, don't want you don't judge people who are pro-choice, who are in favor of killing the thing that you believe approximates a baby and has a right to live, is a it's a philosophically nonsensical argument. If you believe that they are killing a child that has a right to live, how could you not judge them? It is a absolute moral atrocity for you to recognize the sanctity of this life and then not judge the people who want to kill it. It's insane. Now, if she wanted to say something like these people are, promoting a grave evil, I do judge them for it, but I also recognize they know not what they do, or that they can be forgiven, or that we should have mercy, or stuff like that. That's one thing. But to say you don't judge them at all is insane. It is completely philosophically nonsensical with being a pro-life person. I do not understand how you can have that answer. Just like on an internal coherence level, makes no sense. No sense at all. And same thing on the pro-choice side. If you're like genuinely pro-choice because you feel like the baby's like basically worthless and it means nothing, and people are restricting like the woman's right to control her own body, that like the baby's not a baby, it doesn't mean anything, it's actually just a part of a woman's body, like a tumor or like a finger, then you should also be judging pro-life people just by stint of internal consistency. Now, there is an exception because there are some pro-choice people who are pro-choice by cultural default because they get pressured into it, but they don't really think about it. So if this situation was kind of reversed, it would make a little bit more sense. But there's no people really in the US who are of adult age who are pro-life and haven't actually thought about it a little bit. And the reason for that is because it's countercultural. Like, it's really hard to be like pro-life by default as a full-grown adult who has like experienced how the broader culture is like kind of pro-choice and has not had to like think about the fact that you actually recognize the child as a child. Like, that person might exist, but probably doesn't. So if you reverse this statement, it would make a little bit more sense. But from her perspective, completely nonsensical. Insane answer. Completely demented. The last answer was kind of like practically and tactically insane. This answer is just internally insane. I do not understand this answer whatsoever. It makes no sense. Wild stuff from Nikki Haley. My opinion of Nikki Haley was much higher before she got into this presidential race, by the way. My opinion of Nikki Haley has like cratered.
So when we're looking at this, there are some states that are going more on the pro-life side. I welcome that. There's some states that are going more on the pro-choice side. I wish that wasn't the case, but the people decided.
We need.
If you wish that it wasn't the case, it means you're judging the choice. Like, again, maybe like you can do gymnastics to interpret this in a better way, but the fact that you have to do gymnastics shows that she failed in communication.
A 15-week federal limit. 3 out of 4 Americans agree with a 15-week limit.
But don't make.
So I appreciate the candor. I appreciate how honest he is. I really like this answer just because it's goddamn honest. It's just like, this is the thing I want to make happen, and this is how popular it is. And also, it's obviously a good thing to save lives. I really like that answer. Very basic. Unfortunately, Nikki Haley might point this out, is that what's popular with the American electorate is not necessarily popular in the halls of Congress. So just because 3 out of 4 Americans are cool with it doesn't mean, you're going to get 3 out of 4 Congress people to go with it. And also, he doesn't really explain how being president will allow him to do this in any way. Like, saying that he would sign the bill if it exists is like saying I would sign a bill for unicorns if I could. Like, it's like, it doesn't really mean anything. It's more of a virtue signal than anything else. It's not like a practical, substantive, like policy proposal that the president would actually have a huge say in. So I like the answer, like on a pure, like kind of ideological and delivery level, but like in terms of what it actually is, like the implications and like kind of the things it assumes, it's like, it's kind of just virtue signaling.
The American people think that you're going to push something on them when we don't even have the votes in the Senate. It's important that we're honest about that.
Okay, so yeah, Haley's been pushing this for a while, and I actually agree with her on this. Haley's right, is that there's 2 schools of thought here. And Haley's school of thought is essentially, we don't have the votes in the Senate, so why the hell are you talking about federal bans? All that's going to do is like scare pro-choice people and scare moderate people. Like, why would we scare moderate people and pro-choice people with the idea of a federal ban when it's not even something we can do? Like, you can talk about scaring them with a federal ban if it's a thing you can actually do because doing it is worthwhile. But if you can't do it, why make abortion less popular? And that's actually a good tactical point. I actually agree with this to some extent. That's a good tactical point. Tim Scott does not say this, because Tim Scott doesn't get to talk because Tim Scott is not popular and he dropped out after this debate. So that's something. Spoiler alert for how this debate ends. But the other point that you could make if you were Tim Scott, which is that actually pretending like our end goal isn't some form of federal ban, pretending like the pro-choice political goal isn't like what it is, the end goal isn't what it is, actually creates a less trust within the electorate and is something we should get away from. I don't know if I buy that, but it's an argument he could have made. He doesn't make it. Not really his fault that he doesn't make it, but that's the other side for those of you who are interested.